Good evening. I'd like to welcome everybody to the July 25th River Falls City Council meeting. First thing we'll do is stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Christie, can I have a roll call, please?
Bierstead.
Here.
Bjork.
Here.
Carroll.
Here.
Downing.
Here.
Morset.
Here.
Miller.
Here.
Odine.
Here.
Okay, next we have approval of the minutes from the July 11th regular meeting and the workshop minute meetings.
So moved.
Second.
First and second, questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, next we have approval of the bills with Mr. Bjork.
Mr. Mayor and fellow council members, I would like to ask for the approval of bills in the amount of, I have to find it again, but I know it was 900 and some thousand. Oh, there we go, $998,941.25 with approval.
Second. Questions or comments on the bills? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, next move on to public comment. Now's a chance for anybody in the audience who has something they want to stand up and talk about. Now would be the time. If you do come up, please, there should be some paper up there. You can sign your name, address, phone number, all that.
Good evening. I once again appear before you on behalf of the poorest residents of River Falls. River Falls residents who are forced to leave their home and unable to afford to stay in a hotel often only have one option for a safe place to sleep: their car. The recent passage of River Falls' new no camping ordinance removed that option. Sleeping in a car will now result in a fine of $111.40 per person per night. As a result of that ordinance, a single mother with 2 children fleeing domestic abuse caught sleeping in her car by River Falls Police Department will be rewarded with a citation totaling nearly $350. Getting caught sleeping in her car again will result in a much higher penalty. Unless, of course, the intent is to only apply the law selectively based on personal bias, which of course would be unlawful and create both civil and criminal liability for the taxpayers of River Falls, any officer involved, and yourselves. While at the reading of this ordinance, the city administrator claimed it was primarily aimed at recreational campers. This is clearly not true, as only River Falls' poorest residents have received citations for sleeping within the city limits. This, unfortunately, is not the only misinformation the council's trusted advisor, Mr. Simpson, has provided about River Falls' homeless population, most of whom are severely disabled. Sometimes, even trusted advisors must be fact-checked, or you will run the risk of making decisions based on half-truths, as has occurred here. The misinformation provided by Mr. Simpson has led the council to believe that the city is helping residents who lose their housing, when in fact the opposite is true. And while this may serve Mr. Simpson well, it does not serve the residents that you are elected to represent well at all. Not only are the most vulnerable residents in River Falls treated like unwanted people of color in the Deep South in the 1930s, the taxpayers of River Falls are incurring an ever-growing liability for willfully ignoring the protections from abuse of power by both the U.S. and Wisconsin constitutions. River Falls' no camping ordinance is a thinly disguised sunset law. Eventually, this behavior will result in a lawsuit, which will cost River Falls taxpayers dearly. Again, such a suit will not come from me. I will simply be a witness who has kept a record of this horrible mistreatment of River Falls' poorest and most vulnerable citizens. Creating a law which makes it punishable to sleep not only violates the state and federal constitutionally guaranteed protections of citizens from cruel and unusual punishment and violates their human rights, according to the United Nations and even the Geneva Convention. Were I on the council, I would want to at least verify that my previous statements, and these I'm making tonight, are completely unsupported by facts. So far, you seem to be unwilling to make any effort whatsoever to establish whether they are true or not. If you are relying on the word of the city administrator that everything's fine, there's no need to worry, you're not doing the job you were elected to do. This is unfair to the officers of River Falls Police Department who risk losing their qualified immunity every time they attempt to enforce this unlawful ordinance. The taxpayers will foot the bill of any suit that results. It is also unfair to yourselves since you risk losing the qualified immunity enjoyed by elected officials when pursuant to 42 U.S.C. 1983, an individual may file a civil lawsuit against any person who, acting under color of law, deprives an individual of rights created by the U.S.
Hey,
Constitution.
Mr. Linscott, do you have anything, do you have anything new to tell us?
Pardon me, you won't talk to me when I ask you to, and now you're
There's nothing
interrupting
worth
me.
talking to you about.
Thank
Do you have anything new to tell us?
I do. I have
Got a
told you
minute
something
left.
new
You got a
already
minute left.
tonight. I hope you're listening.
I quit listening a long time ago to you.
That's unfortunate.
Yep.
I know you'll take this warning as a threat. After all, I'm rocking the boat by shining a light on a practice that many small towns have used for decades to shove their responsibility for their disabled and elderly homeless residents off on neighboring communities. But in fact, I'm just the weatherman telling you that a storm is coming. You can choose the ethical and humane option, or you can choose to remain on the course you have set. I encourage you to do the right thing.
Anybody else have anything they'd like to talk about? Okay, move on to close the council hearing, open a public hearing on ordinance 2023-11. This is an ordinance creating Title 17 zoning, Chapter 17.5, Corporate Park Zoning District. This is the first reading. Let's see, and Emily, where is she? Emily is our Assistant Director of Community Development. She's gonna give us a little presentation.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Tonight, I'm here to share a proposed new zoning district that would initially apply to the Man Valley Corporate Park area, the Corporate Park Zoning District. The proposed ordinance sets out the purpose of the regulations, provides definitions, sets permitted, accessory, special, and prohibited uses, and describes performance standards that would apply to all the uses in the zoning district. The content of the ordinance was developed from existing code, goals for the Man Valley area, and the covenants that provide additional standards at the Whitetail Ridge and Sterling Ponds corporate parks. So now I'll provide an overview of the ordinance provisions. The purpose statement reflects the goals for the areas to be zoned to corporate park, including high-quality facilities, development that is compatible with adjacent land uses, increasing the non-residential tax base, providing new employment opportunities, and diversifying the local economy. Definitions are important to provide clarity as to what is regulated in the ordinance, particularly when it comes to defining uses. Here's a list of the permitted uses in the Corporate Park Zoning District, including office, light manufacturing, research and development, office showroom, office warehouse, warehousing, and truck terminals. Accessory uses are minor uses associated with a permitted principal use and users on a site. Special uses are those that may be appropriate depending on the specifics of the use. The list of prohibited uses is again intended to provide clarity as to the types of uses desired in the Corporate Park Zoning District. A significant section of the ordinance addresses site performance standards to achieve the purpose of having high-quality development that is compatible with adjacent uses. This includes parking and circulation, open space, and finally, nuisance conditions. In summary, the proposed Corporate Park Zoning District is intended to be consistent with the regulations in Whitetail Ridge and Sterling Ponds corporate parks and establish clear and flexible regulations to achieve the purpose and goals for the Man Valley Corporate Park area and any other areas to be zoned corporate park in the future. Plan Commission reviewed the proposed ordinance on July 6th and forward it to the City Council with a favorable recommendation. With that, I will turn it back to you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So we're still in the public hearing. Is there anybody in the audience has anything like to say about this or questions? Okay, close the public hearing, reopen the council hearing, and if the council has any questions about this.
Mr. Mayor, I have a couple questions. We talked about from existing code. Does that include the comprehensive plan as far as elements of it when it could apply, whether it's solar, connected community, or other parts of it? Multimodal trails is another good example.
That's a great question, and yes. So the comprehensive plan provides the policy foundation for all of our zoning ordinances that are then intended to implement that policy direction.
Thank you very much.
Emmy, before you go, do you see anything uniquely different here versus other industrial areas? Is there anything that you want to point out that's different now compared to the other side?
So it's generally very similar.
Mhm.
We have tailored some of the permitted, accessory, special, and prohibited uses to accomplish the goals at the Man Valley area. We've been more flexible with some of our site development standards. So with regard to setbacks and impervious coverage, we've been very generous to allow for maximum flexibility for arranging buildings and parking on the sites in Man Valley. Businesses still have to meet all of our stormwater regulations and those sorts of things, but wanted to give them flexibility there. Again, with flexibility, we have eliminated parking minimums here, assuming that any business that locates there is going to want to have sufficient parking for the use there. But what this does is it provides flexibility so they've got enough parking and not too much. So again, that we're maximizing the beneficial use of the site and not having excess impervious surface or parking that's not utilized.
That's interesting. So that could become an issue if a company really grew and 100 employees, and now they have 200 employees, there's not going to be enough parking potentially if things went drastically growth-wise.
So similarly, if they are thinking in the future that they're going to be expanding their operations, they may want to set aside land for building expansion and possibly set aside land for future parking. And so that's something that we would look at when a business comes in, is what kind of potential future flexibility they may need and trying to accommodate that from the beginning.
Okay. All right, that's good to hear.
Anybody else have anything? Okay. Thanks, Emily.
Thank you.
Next, I'll close the council hearing and open up a public hearing on ordinance 2023-12. This is amend the official traffic control map, which will include a no right turn on red at Division to Main Street. And is there anybody in the audience has anything like to say about this? Okay, we'll close the public hearing and open the council hearing if the council's got any questions about this.
Mr. Mayor, I have a couple questions. My questions are for Todd, our city engineer. So I'm not against this, but I kind of need to have some, I want to hear some feedback about what we can expect and what's reasonable. So one of my questions is what about traffic backup? In the long-term plan, there's a potential roundabout that would be off at the end of 2nd Street. Would this actually end up backing up traffic too much? Or is this something that's, how do I put it? Do you anticipate that this will allow it to be free-flowing enough so it's not too far backed up?
That's a really good concern. I spent some time just watching the intersection to see if we can expect traffic to back up as it queues, because there will be one single lane of traffic until it splits till you can turn right. There is a potential for a little bit more queuing length. I don't expect it to be significant. I was out there actually today just kind of watching the intersection, and it felt that during the noon hour today, there was enough traffic going north north on Main Street, that traffic moving west on Division Street, turning right or north onto Main, they couldn't go either because traffic flow was so constant. So when the light turned green, everybody went at the same time. But that's a really good concern. But I do want to point out that this configuration, this would likely be completely gone by the time we do a roundabout at Second and Division Street, East Division Street, and a more comprehensive, thoughtful plan incorporating traffic flow across both intersections would be considered at that time.
So this plan is, it's malleable with the future is what you're saying?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And frankly, we're considering a demonstration plan to see how the public accepts it, to see how it works, but also to see how well Public Works can maintain this. We know those flexible bollards, they're going to be removed in the winter for snow removal, but we also know that they're going to get hit. We don't know how often they'll get hit, but they will, and how much Public Works time will be required to go replace them. We know the pavement in that intersection is not perfect, and painting imperfect pavement is a recipe for paint not to last that long. So we've got this opportunity to paint using a grant fund, and we're kind of considering it a temporary project just to see how well the bike and ped plan is accepted by the community.
From my understanding, that grant is an AARP, meant to be an all ages grant, which includes artwork in that area.
Correct.
Okay, that's good. Well, I appreciate your planning and the detail that's going into it. Thank you, Tom.
I can't take any credit for the grant. That's all in the back, but it's kind of a neat project. Good opportunity to just try something a little new and a little different.
Thank you.
I just have a quick comment if I could. I had a lot of the same concerns that the city engineers already recognized, Mr. Downing recognized, backing up. I am in full favor of the eastbound division to southbound Main having a no turn on red. I think that is a dangerous thing that's going on there right now. The what I'm going to call the St. Bridget's the St. Bridget's changes, keeping it a family event tonight. I'm not real wild about. I do understand this is a demonstration. This is a let's try and see what happens. I'm concerned about the snow plows. I'm concerned about the paint adhesion. I am concerned that right now, if you're the fourth car back, you can't get to the yield and go north. You got to wait till traffic moves anyway. So, I think what I'm happy to hear is that we know all the concerns and we've got attention on all the concerns that I have, and I'm sure the public has too. So I'm happy to hear that the city has recognized those, but I'm also willing to give it a try and see what happens, with the understanding that if it doesn't, we can change it.
And it's just a 6-month test, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't expect that paint to be great after sitting through winter. So we'll see what it looks like in the spring, and if we put the bollards back up in spring 2024, they will be removed for plowing in the winter.
Okay, anybody else?
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, let's move on to the consent agenda. First one, acknowledgement of the following minutes. We got the River Falls Park and Recreation Advisory Board of 6/21. We have the Plan Commission from, excuse me, from 6/6. We got the Business Improvement District from 6/13. We have the Historic Preservation Commission from 6/21. We have the West Central Wisconsin Biosolids Facility Commission from 6/15, and we have the Utility Advisory Board from 6/19. Next is a resolution approving development agreement between the City of River Falls and Sterling Ponds 1 LLC. Next one is a resolution approving purchase agreement with Sterling Ponds 1 LLC. And the last one is a resolution approving first right of refusal for Sterling Ponds 1 LLC. Does anybody want to pull anything?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to pull 5, 6, and 7.
Mr. Mayor, I move approval of consent agenda 4A through F.
Second.
First and second, any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, Mr. Downey, you pulled the rest of them? We want to go over each one, or you want?
I'll try to, okay. Number 5, resolution approving development agreement between City of River Falls and Sterling Ponds LLC. And these questions pertain to each of them. And I guess my questions are for Mr. Simpson, our city administrator. And in the agreement, it talks about $1 and minimum improvements. Does this agreement give this contract enough time to be met by December 1st, 2023? What is a standard amount of time for like a contract like this when working in a unique type of development relationship?
This contract has been negotiated, or development agreement's been negotiated with the project developer, and I don't think we have that's an analysis we could do, is try to go back and look and see when you approved it and what the dates of deliverables were, but I don't know that there's a standard time that I could give you with some kind of mathematical accuracy. We've had some developers that are ready to go and they want deliverable dates at a certain point sooner, because they may be using that for financing or working with the banks, and the banks want to see some dates. We've had developers that want 18 or 24 months because they know it's going to take them some time. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I would say there is not a standard time. And in this case, the developer is aware of what they're agreeing to for delivery, and they believe that's they can accomplish it. In fact, there's been some discussion about, there's been soil sampling and other things in advance of this development agreement at the developer's cost to try to get going.
So they believe this is a reasonable agreement. There was no early on objections.
No, I'm not aware of objections to the development agreement in its form.
Okay. I also noticed there was a 60-day to comply in development agreements and development defaults. And I've seen this timetable move for different developers in my district before. Is this something that is ironclad, or is this something that might come back to the council if they request an extension?
I'm not sure I understand that question.
If they didn't meet if the developer requested more time than 60 days to comply, if there was a hang up for any reason, is that something that would come back to us, or would it be something that goes to you?
It likely would be handled as staff level first to try to give them some due process to resolve but ultimately if there's a breach of contract and we want to pursue legal efforts, it would come back to the council. Is there scenarios, Mr. Gerhart, where that wouldn't be the case?
No, if you're going to pursue any breach, it'll come back before the council. And just to clarify, in this development agreement, it was negotiated by council on both parties. The December date is just commencement of construction. The completion date isn't until 2025.
In your professional opinion, Chris, do you consider this to be a fair negotiated contract?
Yes.
All right, thank you very much. And I guess for me, I think it's okay. We don't do a lot of these from when I've been here, so I appreciate your answers. And I know there's not any true standards we have as far as how we do these, but I think it's important to be cautious when we do some of these projects. So with that, Mr. Mayor, I move approval for consent agenda item number 5.
Second. First and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Wait,
Just want to point out or remind the council that you do have a policy on the use of tax incremental financing, and so this is within the policy. You've set our parameters as far as what value you require and what terms and length, and so yes, you've given staff wide latitude within that, but this is developed. There is standards that we're using when we develop this.
Okay, thank you.
okay, let's do that again. All in favor of resolution 5, developer agreement, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay,
Mr. Mayor, move for consent agenda item number 6.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Mr. Mayor, I move for consent agenda item number 7.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, next is, well, actually, Sean's here. Sean will give us a little presentation on all the ordinances here. So we'll have that first, and then we'll go into the different resolutions.
Are you I don't remember which one.
It's Adobe. Just file full screen. Full screen. Yeah, full screen. Perfect. Yep. Thanks, Scott. Mayor, Council, good evening. Nice to see you all. We've been working with city staff on the finance plan primarily for two major projects that the city is undertaking, and I'm sure I don't need to educate you on these two projects, the Man Valley Corporate Park and the Biosolids facility. So what we want to go over today is the finance plan for that, the timeline that we're going to be working forward going forward to finance those two projects, and to answer any questions that you might have. So Man Valley Corporate Park, I know the council's very familiar with the site and the project. It's ongoing, as well as preparing for this development of this site, and really as planning for the long-term funding source for the site. The city created Tax Incremental District number 19. And as you're probably aware, I know city staff has discussed the Tax Increment District with you at length. The concept with the tax increment district and other tax increment districts that the city has successfully used is to put in infrastructure, make land available for development, and then the biggest, most important part is attracting that development that creates new tax base. From that tax base, the city gets new tax revenue, and that revenue, because it's in a tax increment district, you're getting for a fixed period of time all of the taxing jurisdictions portions of the tax revenue. You then are dedicating that revenue to pay back the costs associated with getting that site ready to begin with. So the key with all of this as it pertains to Man Valley, and I know a major focus of city staff and the council is promoting and then ultimately developing the Man Valley area. Okay. So any questions on that? The last thing I will mention to you is related to TID 19 as the final bullet point on this slide. Even if you had a significant development next year in 2024, the tax increment district won't see revenue from that until 2026. So there's always a time lag from the point that a development occurs to when the tax revenue is there. What's nice for River Falls is because of prudent financial planning over a long period of time, you as a community are in a position to be able to weather that and manage it until that revenue starts to materialize. Okay. Now, the expenses. So as we've worked primarily with Josh on the list of costs, and I believe these have been before you previously, for the Man Valley Corporate Park, we have major infrastructure improvements to the site and in the site. And those fall in the categories of street and stormwater work, water work, sewer work, and some electric or street lighting type expenses as well. On top of that, I know you've researched the idea of having a separate biosolids facility, and that financing is included in this year's overall package of financing, with a cost estimate on that of around $8.5 million. Okay. Now, for the financing this year, oops. There we go. I got these one out of order, so I'm going to go here and then go back. We're looking at two financing issues. We're looking at a general obligation issue, which is an issue that'll be backed by the full faith and credit. It's the strongest type of debt issue, strongest collateral that you as a city can pledge. And that is going to be for the sewer, the electric, and the street and stormwater portion of Man Valley, as well as for the biosolids facility. And those will all be put together in that financing issue. It would lock into 20-year interest rates, locked in, only action, future action, the council could change it once it has been predicated or it has been accepted and locked in. For planning purposes,
we've used an interest rate of about 4.46%. And if we were all selling debt today, the market would be about 0.5% lower than that. But for planning purposes, we try to be a little bit more on the conservative end. Now, the one component that we, in working with city staff, we wanted to certainly have with interest rates, if we could lock in, we wanted to lock in. But since the biosolids and the sewer portion were going to be attached to the general obligation issue, and we want to be cognizant of the amount of total general obligation debt that the city has outstanding, the water utility portion, which if we go back 2 slides, it's around just under 4.9 million of the total. That was going to be financed with debt ultimately backed by the water utility or within the realm of a revenue bond of the water utility. We had originally contemplated a long-term debt issue for that immediately, but in reviewing it again with city staff, and I think there was some documents that were exchanged with the council to update you, I think the more prudent action is to develop that tax increment 19 revenues a little further so we can use that as part of the total revenues of the water utility, and then go into a long-term debt for the water for that portion at that point. And that would lead us more into what we call an interim or a bond anticipation type financing, which will give the city about a 5-year period. You could end up doing this faster if development occurs faster in TID 19, but up to a 5-year period before making a final decision on how long to extend that debt over and how to extend that debt. Okay, so again, 2 financings: general obligation for the bulk of the Man Valley projects, and also the biosolids, water short-term issue for the Man Valley water projects. Okay. Oops. This was the other slide I did want to share with the council. As I mentioned, when we use general obligation debt, most powerful tool that you have, garners typically the lowest interest rates that you can get. There is a limitation on that by the state, and the limitation is 5% of the equalized value of the entire city. So for River Falls, that's about 75 million is your limit for GO borrowing debt. What you see on the chart, the blue bars are existing debt that the council has authorized in the past, and then the gradual over time repayment of that debt and the principal balance going down over that time. The green bars are representative of the new approximately $18 million general obligation issue that we're talking about for this year. I wanted to include this for 2 reasons. One, as you know, and I don't need to tell you, you're taking on 2 very, very large projects right now. You have used your general obligation borrowing very prudently in the past because you're at relatively low amount of it outstanding. This is right in the ballpark of doubling the amount of general obligation debt that the city will have outstanding. But at the same time, you're still way, way below that total borrowing capacity that you have. And I think in talking with Josh about the CIP that you have, it's certainly a manageable number for you to be able to take on even very large projects like this. So timeline-wise, tonight, with the general obligation debt, there is a very step-by-step procedure that we have to follow under state statutes. The first step is approval of initial resolutions, and they put the initial resolutions into certain categories. The plan is to sell the general obligation issue as one issue, but the categories we have to approve individually. So there's a category for the TID 19 corporate development, community development projects. Again, that's the sewer, streets, and electric portions of that. And then there's a separate initial resolution for the biosolids facility. And then those combined together will be sold as one, what they call corporate purpose bonds. And that just means that there's multiple purposes for the bond issue itself. What we'll be doing in the meantime from now until September, which is the day we expect to get competitive bids for the issue and bring those back for your review, and that would be the point where you could accept the winning bid and lock into the interest rates. We'll be working with Moody's Investor Service on the city's bond rating, which currently have an excellent rating of AA2. Last year when we talked with Moody's, we did prep them that the city had some major projects upcoming. Josh and the city staff, Scott, went over that. So they know something about it. Now we're going to give them the full details. And we'll also be putting together what's called the official statement, and that's the document that goes out to investors and what they use to bid on the issue. We also will, at the August 8th meeting, we're going to have a final recommendation on the water issue that I talked about, the short-term issue. And that is not quite the same responsibilities of the timeline that the state sets out for issuing general obligation bonds. So it'll work fine to have your final review and approval of that at the August 8th meeting. Again, leading up to the sale on September 12th of both issues and your review of those results at that point. And finally, for the council, I commonly get questions about, well, where's the market generally at for this type of debt? This is a chart going back to 1994 to current interest rates over that period of time. You can see it was about February and March of last year that we saw the real rise in interest rates. That's when the Fed started raising rates and some of the other activities that went on at that time. That has stabilized and has somewhat come down. And when you look at it over a longer term basis like this, going back to 94, you can see on a long-term basis, we're still in a fairly attractive interest rate environment. We're not in the environment of early January of, say, 2020, when they were at historic lows at that period of time. But overall, looking at it a long window, we're still in a pretty good time interest rate wise. Okay. With that, unless Scott or Josh has anything to add, I guess I would put it back, Mayor, to you and the council. And any questions on the resolutions or anything that can be helpful?
Okay, thanks, Sean. Okay, so the initial resolution authorized, the first one is initial resolution authorizing $9,750,000 of general obligation bonds for community development projects in tax incremental districts. I'll take a motion on this.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, questions and comments?
I'll take your questions first, if there's council, but I have a couple of things to say about the issuance.
Sure. I guess my only question is, I know we've talked about this before, but as far as fiber internet being part of that, it's not, from my understanding, like as far as Man Valley setup goes.
Fiber internet will be provided, but it's not a responsibility or cost of the city, nor is it part of the borrowing.
So so in other words, the lay of it will be involved in the setup, is what you're saying, not the service, like.
Yeah, at our initial I don't think it was called pre-construction meeting yet. It's in our initial utility coordination meeting. We had at least 2 fiber providers interested in going in there. So the initial spec is for, I think, 3 conduits.
Good to hear, because I know that having that type of high-speed fiber optic can really help develop things faster because it's in demand. Thank you.
I would assume conversations also included the gas company.
Yeah, all the utilities, private and
Not the cities.
private and public. And when we say private, they're mostly publicly held companies, at least that we've been introduced so far. So AT&T and Comcast and Pierce Pepin it's the Swift Current fiber product, St. Croix Gas, City Electric. All those are the utilities that are coordinating into trenches. And then we have water and sewer in separate trenches.
John, when did you say the official statement is going to be put together? I know you need it for September, but when will you have it put together by?
Yeah, I would guess that will be done in the middle of August,
Okay,
would be my
so-
guess. And the council will get a copy of that.
Right. And then you mentioned something, or you showed, and I love the chart there with the showing the interest rate. I thought, and Scott, you would know being a banker, but I thought they were talking about bumping up interest rates again yet this week.
Those are short-term rates. I'll let Sean speak to that more, but they're
Okay.
short-term rates and the market already builds that stuff in anyway, but
Yeah.
go ahead, Sean.
I didn't say specifically, but the chart we were looking at
Yeah.
is a longer term interest rate chart. But you are correct. I just heard on the news today that the Fed as you may recall, did not raise rates the last time they met, but they are kind of re-looking at inflation, and there's a potential that they'll raise them again. My sense is on a long-term index like we were looking at, there's, and kind of looking forward, the market is probably prepping for that or already is building that into how they're bidding on things, because I think the view, the common view was that the decision to take a month off and not raise rates at the last was a short-term decision. That the expectation is that there was still going to be a few more interest rate bumps up.
Yeah, and it sounded like it's a done deal. They're, come Thursday, they will bump it.
Yeah, I think my employer and I anticipate another quarter bump.
Yep.
And I think that's what the markets are already building in, but the long-term, the yield curve is inverted right now, so the long-term rates are cheaper than the short-term rates are. It's a weird time.
It is. It is.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, anybody else have anything on this one?
So Mayor,
Yep.
so I wanted to point out, or provide a little more context, but you have your memo. So I just want the council to be clear on the actions that we're recommending they take. So staff is recommending you approve the resolution for 10 and 11. We believe that we can do better than the 20-year revenue bond that was proposed in 12. So we're not asking the council to approve that. Like some additional time to look at other financing options. If you're wondering what does that look like, it looks like some of the things that Sean talked about, like a bond anticipation note. It also could look like bank placed financing. Could also look like state trust fund loan financing. So there's a couple of things that we want to take a look at to see on that revenue bond side as an alternative. I don't think it's going to result in us coming back and saying, well, we changed our mind again. We want to do the 20-year revenue bond. That's a possibility that you should be prepared for. But we're just saying at this point, it's pretty clear that 10 and 11 are the right direction to go. It's the best long-term interest rates that we can get under that scenario where we're selling them on the market in a formal bond sale. We're saying water, we'd like a little bit more time. I also want to point out that at the time the council approved the contracts for construction, I suggested that was the time to back out if you thought the risk was too high and the potential reward is too little. Certainly this whole project is not without risk. The council and the community are taking a big step in investing in their future. If you don't approve the financing of the projects that you've already approved, we'll just be back here again asking you to borrow money a different way because we likely will not have the cash flow to go forward in 25. We could probably make it through 24, but we'll be back soon if you don't approve this. So it's a little anticlimactic, but I just want to remind you that we suggested if you had a pause policy-wise on the investment, that would occur before we issued the construction contracts. We haven't issued the construction contracts for the biosolids, so that the one caveat is that's a big part of this. Potentially, if the council had some concerns about that project, you could modify this, or we could modify it on your behalf to exclude the biosolids, but it looks like this is a really good way to finance the biosolids. It also brings the risk down for the general, for the GO portion of this, because you have a reliable revenue source going forward. You've seen all kinds of analysis on how that would work with the sewer utility. So that's kind of where we're at.
Scott, is the biggest risk nobody would want to build or grow in Man Valley, or what risks do you see as your top risks there?
Yeah, I mean, the top risk is that there's a lack of development that occurs because the construction that you projected is based on being supported by development. So there isn't alternative things that we can use 14-inch water pipe for, and out there, the risk would be a lack of development or a really slow pace, meaning nothing happens for 20 or 25 years. So that would be the biggest risk because of the outlays you have. the risk to the general fund or the tax levy portion of the city is minimized because you're trying to service about 400,000 in debt. So the risk is that something doesn't happen, and then you have to say no to projects for the next 10 years that you otherwise would want to do in the parks or fire stations or other things that you could use that money. So I don't think the risk is that we wouldn't have the money to service this debt out of our general obligation. In fact, I'll be suggesting to Moody's on the bond call that even if everything bad went, we still have a lot of fiscal resilience. We have lots of capacity, and the general fund or the levy portion, if the TID couldn't make its way, is about 440,000 a year. It's that street stormwater portion that has no other payer. The electric sewer and the biosolids portion has the rate support to do it, even under the current scenarios, or with minimal new development. Does that answer your question?
Yep, it does. Thank you.
The risk is really on that street stormwater portion that you're expecting the TID to pay. If you don't have increment, if you don't have new growth and development,
Yep.
then we have to pay it out of general. You are saying you're going to pay it out of general obligation.
The majority of our eggs are in that basket.
I don't know if it's a majority, but it's a healthy percentage.
Mhm.
It may be less than 50% of eggs in that basket, but
But I don't want to lose sight of the flip side of that, and that's the risk of lost opportunity if we don't build it.
Right, right.
And
What do we do with the land?
having something, if we don't have it for them to come to, we don't grow.
Right, agree.
And so there's risk on both sides.
Yep.
I think. And I think, again, is similar to what we talked about with a couple items before. We recognize the risk, and I think we're making a pretty well-informed decision here. At least I feel I am, but.
and we recommend it. So it's not, I mean, it's not, I'm not walking away from the recommendation or trying to cover our butts as staff. We're all in with you.
Okay. Did anybody else have anything on this one, on 8? Okay, Christie, can we have a roll call, please?
Bjork,
Yes.
Odine,
Yes.
Carroll,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Morset,
Yes.
Downing,
Yes.
Bierstead.
Yes.
Okay, number 9 is initial resolution authorizing $8,665,000 general obligation bonds for sewerage projects.
I move approval. Second.
For a second, questions on this one? Christie?
Odine,
Yes.
Downing,
Yes.
Morset,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Carroll,
Yes.
Bierstead,
Yes.
Bjork.
Yes.
Okay, next is resolution directing publication of notice to electors relating to bond issues.
I move.
Second.
Questions or comments? Christie?
Miller,
Yes.
Bjork,
Yes.
Bierstead,
Yes.
Morset,
Yes.
Downing,
Yes.
Odine,
Yes.
Carroll.
Yes.
Okay, and last one is a resolution providing for the sale of not to exceed $18,415,000 of general obligation corporate purpose bonds.
I move approval.
Second.
Questions or comments? Christie?
Morset,
Yes.
Carroll,
Yes.
Bjork,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Odine,
Yes.
Bierstead,
Yes.
Downing.
Yes.
Okay, thanks, Christie. And 12 was pulled from the agenda, so we will go down to comptroller's report.
The comptroller's report for June 2023. General fund revenues through the end of June were $5,932,280, or 46.2% of total budgeted revenues for the year. Revenues in June included $12,502 for swimming pool fees, $18,701 for vehicle registration fees, $16,813 in building permits, and $15,090 for plumbing inspection permits. Expenditures through the end of June were $5,793,886, or 45.2% of total budgeted expenditures for the year. So as of June 30th, 2023, net revenues over expenditures were $138,402.
Thanks, Diane.
Move to adjourn. Oh, we had a couple things. Heidi Hines from the Historic Preservation Commission has resigned because she's taken a job up in Stillwater at a place. So at some time, I think we need to recognize the great job that Heidi's done. And then as well with Scott being on the park board, and the Glen Park had a great 125th anniversary party last week at the park, and they did a great job, both the park board and the Historic Preservation Commission. So I just wanted to make sure that was brought up.
Okay,
Now, move to adjourn.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we are adjourned.